And we're back. Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to the Green Room, episode 2. Don't go in the woods. So a little
Good
bit different
evening.
format tonight than our normal Wednesday night shows. Tonight we have guests Melon and Porter on. Gentlemen, good evening.
Good evening. Happy to be here.
Good evening.
Tonight we're going to be giving a bit of an overview of some North Carolina, particularly Appalachian folklore. A little bit of a schizo deep dive into a few different topics, and we're going to have our guests share a few stories of some experiences they've had up here in the woods. So, gentlemen, I think we'll start off tonight with a little bit of a lighter hearted topic, um, getting into some of the folklore of the region. I'm sure everyone here has heard of the Brown Mountain Lights. The lights they're pretty well known in the United States. It's a very popular kind of tourist attraction these days almost, and it has been for well over 100 years. There's this phenomenon in the Appalachians near to Morganton, outside of Morganton, a little west in the Pisgah National Forest, of these glowing lights of different colors, typically orange, but not always, hovering, moving, vanishing above and below the ridges around Brown Mountain. And there's quite a few tales about them, bunch of theories as to what they are. It's one of the more famous phenomenon in North Carolina. And I believe they're a little harder to see nowadays. And maybe that's due to more observers or more frequent reporting. But I know at least in my family, I've grown up being told different uncles and aunts have seen them all in various stages and attempted to see them, and it's a popular pastime, in the area to go out there and hike for them and see them. I won't really get into the more out there theories as to what they are, but um, all sorts of stories, anything from Cherokee legends to murders and ghosts, everything abounds, all the alien schizo theories. But yeah, if anyone is ever up in the Brown Mountain area once the um, hurricane recovery is complete and you're able to stop by the area, I highly recommend going to some of the overlooks and seeing if you can find the lights for yourself. But yeah, I guess we can move on from there. Mr. Kevin, I know you were dying to talk about a particular group of people, some sort of moon-eyed people.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm not sure how many of y'all have ever seen the pictures or the statues of the moon-eyed people, but yeah, if you take a quick Google and you'll see a few statues. Now, just a little bit of a background on them. The moon-eyed people are like a mysterious group that is a part of our folklore around here, or just mostly through the Appalachian. And these stories even go back to the Cherokee. Now, they're said to have, and this kind of even goes back to the Cherokee, that they have been around here or inhabited the land even before the Cherokee. And essentially, there's different stories. There's different, ideas about it. But yeah, we can kind of go into that a little bit here. Now, some of their features are they're small in stature. They have really pale skin or very light complexion. They've got blue eyes, and their eyes are supposedly extremely sensitive, which is why they call them the Moon-Eyed People, is because they mostly come out at night. Yeah, so according to the legend, they only come out at night, and they live in caves or underground dwellings to avoid the sunlight. Now, a lot of our sightings here in North Carolina have been around Murphy, which is in Cherokee County, and the surrounding Smoky Mountains. From my understandings, like people even further down south have reported seeing them. So there's even near Fort Mountain in Georgia, there's a stone wall that some people say was actually made by the Moon-Eyed People. But supposedly, this even goes here into North Carolina. There are some artifacts, including, that particular structure, but there is a rock. I think it's called the Jukela rock in Callaway. But it's got like different art and drawings. Now, some people will say this is even before the Cherokee. It's not directly tied to the Moon-Eyed People, but it does come up in the legend of the Moon-Eyed People.
Does that connect in with the feral people, or is it similar, or is it separate?
They're separate, yet they can be connected. And we can get into feral people as well, because the two stories are very much similar. But the feral people are like one of those things that's just kind of all over the place. Like some people even associate it with Bigfoot or wild man. The feral people just kind of get lumped into it's a broad, like a very big tent, I guess.
So question,
yeah.
This is as the token Yankee here, we don't hear a whole lot about this, but what I have heard about is feral children, as in they never learn how to speak, and they're like this lower level of consciousness, and you can't actually fix people if they're like that, right? They're just permanently like that.
Yeah, so it depends. So there's a lot of, I guess, speculation. I don't know, because like no one's ever been able to really confirm exactly what the feral people are. There are some people that say that they're, let me get my notes here, families that just kind of moved out into the woods. They just got away to never kind of come back, right? And then just over time, they just kind of lost touch with modern day, and they're living off the land. Now, I guess, there's some people that say that it's just overall a result of isolationism. They're just due to the condition of living in the mountains. And, anybody that's ever spent any amount of time in the mountains understands that it's a very rugged type of lifestyle. Like it takes a particular type of person to get out there and just actually rough it. And, if they're, I guess like in some ways, like, cut off from technology, just living off the land and stuff like that. My assumption is, things just do change over some time. And there's got to be some form of isolationism, just being stuck even just with your family over time.
I think it's important though, when you're talking about specifically feral people, this is sort of a caveat I wanted to add early on. There definitely are real stories out there, and I'm a firm believer in them. To almost schizo degree. However, I think it's important to point out that a decent amount of these stories are sort of like sensationalized like cosmopolitan stories, and what I mean by that is, um, back in the day, at least, you'd get some pieces that would get spurred up in newspapers and whatever, and then more recently, movies. You know, you'll see stuff like Deliverance or The Hills Have Eyes, and there's been a sort of pop culture that's built up around negatively mythologizing the Appalachians, and I think it's important to point out that most of, maybe not most, but a good number of these quote unquote feral people stories or whatever are kind of just, I don't know, in a way like denigrating like some of the Appalachian lifestyles. So I think like we kind of have to take the good with the bad with them. You know, like I do believe when you get into stuff like the Dennis Martin case, you know, like okay, maybe there's some like cave dwelling like things out there, but you know, trying not to like over sensationalize the, you know, the Appalachians are just you know,
Yeah.
all full of feral people. However, I do think we should propagandize Yankees to that so they stop moving up here.
And we have we have a successful example of this, gentlemen. We all ganged up and told told a gentleman I know from Illinois, don't move down there, you'll get eaten, and he believed us.
Yeah. Hey, there you go, man. So you know, should we protect those folk for our own, you know, despite ourselves, you know?
So this
well,
is
you know,
off topic, right? But this is what's called an anti-meme, I think. Blood
Yeah.
Satellite actually talked about this. It's like a wall of negative ground that can actually protect an area. You have to make the decision on whether it's worth it, but this is like a real thing. There's like been papers
Yeah.
written on this.
Yeah, and I mean, so there is a lot of like I guess, for lack of a better term, urban legend around them, because you know you know, we're not used to, if we do come across isolationists or hermits or what have you, then yeah, sure. But we do know, and this is not to go off of the trope, but you know, there are certain families that have been able to maintain their bloodline, but it's mostly through inbreeding and stuff like that. And I know that there's been a few documentaries on some of those families throughout the years. And part of me wonders if some of these folk that do talk about the feral people do come across some of those people. You know, I've seen some of the footage of those folks and seen some of their pictures and stuff. And even for me, knowing that it's around and living where I do, even though I'm essentially right around the foothills, and used to spend a lot of time in the mountains as a kid, it still does kind of get me a little bit too.
Yeah. No, I think the true like feral people, I think it's a bit of a misnomer, because I think when we're actually thinking about, you know, when we say feral people, and you're actually thinking about it, I think it's a bit of a misnomer, because we're not really thinking about people per se. We're thinking of like something else, something that's like in that uncanny valley territory. And I'm
somewhat
I definitely
ghoulish,
think
and
those are out there.
yeah, and I mean, it's interesting because the Moon-Eye people and the feral people, you know, like that, those two will get kind of brought up together, and you know, I guess like to kind of steer the ship back around to the Moon-Eye people. You know, the speculation, you know, on that is, you know, some people have said that the Moon-Eye people are, you know, aliens. Some people have said that they're the feral people. You know, some of the more interesting things to me, you know, and obviously there's some people that say that they're, you know, they were a tribe of albinos, and that they've somehow been able to like maintain, and that's part of the reason why the way they are. They were like cast out. But one of the one that's really interesting to me is doing a lot of my research about the Moon Eye people throughout the years is their connection with the Welsh. And I'm not sure if y'all are familiar with any of that or not, but there are some claims that the Prince Madoc of Wales sailed to America around 1170, and he established a settlement in that area. Excuse me. Now, the claim is that they managed to sail here to America around that time, 1100s, around or the late 1100s to early 1200s, and part of the motivation was after his father's death, there was a power struggle there, and so he essentially left with a group of people, and they ended up landing in North Carolina, and wanted to make a new life there. Now, when there wasn't a lot of written language, so a lot of this is just passed down verbally. But you could say that, let's just say the Welsh were, maybe not as tall as maybe the English or whatever, or maybe even as tall as the Cherokee at the time. But
yeah, famously coal miners, right? Weren't they like big on going underground?
Yeah, no, what's interesting about this particular claim is the structures that were built, with the wall and stuff like that. The belief is that wall was more of a defense mechanism. And, if they did happen, let's just say hypothetically they were able to make that voyage and they did land here. So if they were able to do that, there's obviously tribes probably in that area and stuff like that. And they were probably fighting a lot, having to defend their life and stuff. So it would make sense, because a lot of the tribes around that time, they just weren't making defenses like that. There was no other type of, structures being built like that.
Wait, are we talking like stone masonry, like actual fortifications?
It's a wall. I'm not able to bring it up on my screen, but like there are some walls that stretch out for a while. Let me see if I have any notes on the construction of the wall.
Yeah, there's no way Indians were making that, right?
I can definitely see it. If I was a WASP settler moving into North Carolina and I came across like a short, ghastly beast calling itself a Welshman, I can definitely see how people would consider those to be aliens.
Yeah, I mean, it fits though, right?
I was just defaming the Welsh.
Hey, listen now.
John
D's going to be upset. Yeah, one Welsh.
Yeah,
but it's interesting you say that. There's like the supposed Welsh connection is interesting because that's right around the same time, maybe 50, 100 years after the whole Vikings and Vinland thing. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, recently there's been some sort of genetic studies, and if I'm completely just talking out of my butt here, I apologize, but from what I remember, there's been some genetic studies on whatever the tribes are out in like the Newfoundland region that have been finding a lot of, or not maybe a lot, but at least trace amounts of European admixture. So it begs the question of, what if other groups came over? There's a similar story. It's really interesting to me because it ties into my family's like Scottish clan heritage, but the legend of Henry Sinclair, the Earl of Orkney, in 1400, I believe. His story ended up getting, or his legend rather, ended up getting tabloidized into the Da Vinci Code with the whole like, hiding the Holy Grail and whatever else. But the actual Scottish legend goes that this man, in however many crew he brought, came to the Americas in like 1400, late 1300s, and then vanished here, and with supposedly without a trace. So it's interesting to see all the various, you know, Welsh, Norse, Scottish stories of these sort of mythical kings going on their odysseys to who knows where. There's some potential connections to, and additionally, the like the Anglo-Saxon exodus after the Norman conquest. Um, there was essentially a large exodus of Anglo-Saxons, and most of them ended up going to um, all over the place. A lot of them, the majority of them, for that matter, ended up going to service in the Byzantine army, making up the majority of the Varangian Guards. And there's a whole separate schizo theory about a Anglo-Saxon colony in the Crimea based off of that. But all
Yeah,
that to say,
yeah.
like we have all of these comparative stories of Exodus fleets and adventurous sea captains and nobles that are. I wonder if there is something to that, of them coming here, of someone coming here, or maybe multiple groups at different times, and then sort of tribalizing over hundreds of years of isolation.
Yeah, I strongly believe people knew about America way before we were told, obviously, and it makes sense because you would want to send like your most outlier, like heroic type white guys over here first. You know what I mean? And just like not even tell anyone else it exists. Because I mean, we could get into like the old gods and like the types of things that the Aztecs and the Indians were worshiping, but it really needed put down. Like, frankly, like there were bad things going on over here.
Yeah, let me see if I can get a picture of. That's not the one I wanted to share. Let me see if I can get a picture up here in a second of that rock. It's pretty interesting.
Horatius, you know what that actually makes me think of is the Falmer of all things, like this race that goes. You know what I'm talking about?
Uh, Fill me in.
It's just like a common trope in fiction that this race of humans goes below the ground and gets cut off and has like a civilization down there. I don't know how they would have agriculture, but stranger things have happened. They would have to just do raids up to the surface, wouldn't they?
Yeah, here's a picture of that rock.
Is that the one in West
Curtis,
Virginia?
X is asking us to, or not me, not you. What is that? Yeah, not me, not you. On X is asking us to give him the rock.
That's a big rock.
Yeah. The Porter, that rock is in. Give me a second. I believe this is in. I believe it's in North Carolina, actually, in Callaway.
There's another one that was found in West Virginia that has Celtic pictographs.
Oh.
And there was a supposed tribe of Celtic people called the Duhar, that's Duhar, that was talked about in one of the early governors of South Carolina as being Celtic in nature and herding deer for dairy.
Yeah, the Celts famously being all over the place, including all the way into Asia, which people don't realize. It wouldn't surprise me if they got over here.
Yeah, even pharaohs have Celtic DNA, and there's also the Galatian has Celtic DNA.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. I know it's become more popular recently to sort of claim, like on the other side of the United States, some very likely Polynesian um, settlers reaching. So I don't really see how it's out of the realm of possibility for on the east, perhaps Celts or Carthaginians or whoever else. You get blown off course in some of those trade winds out in the Atlantic, and you end up over here.
Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can get that rock up.
It's interesting, especially how much of this we see sort of centered in North Carolina. I think it kind of gets into the whole schizo theory behind the national parks. I'm sure some of you are pretty well read into those different theories. Um, some of them, including like, well, they were created to keep us out and keep something else in, and so on and so forth. How do y'all feel about that?
So, in my opinion, we're not in a position where we can destroy like the lower G gods that the Indians were worshiping. All we can do right now is contain them, and that's why this happened. Which is another schizo thing is if there's like drug cartels operating in there, then this is like kind of an extension of like the Aztec, like they're like in their god's zone, and I lost my train of thought. But yeah, I think that there's something we don't understand that's dark in those places, and there's a reason they were walled off.
Can you sort of go into the like the lowercase g gods concept?
Well,
just
yeah,
for those who are not aware.
famously, didn't a lot of the pagan traditions and divinations and things stop working after Christ? Well, there's people that didn't drop these traditions and kept pursuing them, and because they were like when you sacrifice something, that's like an external power source. It's kind of like in a way it's industrial because it's like you're like splitting an atom or setting something on fire to get the energy of it rather than it coming from you. And there was a lot of that going on over here with the Indians. Famously, they would just go around scalping people, and it was even worse in the American Southwest, which no one could get a handle on until God sent white people to do it for them. It's these lowercase gods out of time. Yeah, someone in chat says they petered out over time. Yes, and this is even more important because there's diminishing returns with this, so they feel the need to do it more. They feel the need to be more and more destructive, sort of like a druggie chasing the dragon.
I was finally able to get the one of those rocks up here.
That is very interesting. Is that similar to that rock? That's similar to some of the potential or unconfirmed like runic inscriptions that have been found or allegedly found in where was it? Was it Michigan, I believe, years and years ago? Let me pull that up.
So this is a language?
You talking about the rock?
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah. I mean, I haven't read up on this, but this is what Porter was talking about. So this is Celtic language, apparently. Yeah, it's super interesting.
Kevin, pull up the Kensington runestone. Now that's going to make some people's eyes roll. Like the overwhelming scholarly consensus, as per usual with anything of this subject, is that it's some sort of a hoax. But the sort of story behind that goes to some sort of Norse explorers, finding these locations in Michigan and carving runes into a stone. Um, so
I
some
think I
over the
found that.
last
Yeah.
over the last however many years, some like different schizos up and down Michigan and the Great Lakes have been claiming to find more and more material along those lines. So I wonder. I mean, it's easy to make hoaxes, and there's plenty out there. Um, but typically, any time that academics immediately say, "Oh, this is a hoax," and it's like, okay, let's. That's usually an alarm bell in your head. That's like, maybe we should look at this. So I wonder, just because we've got this sheer volume of stories out there from all these different groups, that maybe at least one of them is true in some capacity. Um, maybe something even more ancient. I was talking about like Carthaginians potentially. Um, but I wonder, over time, if any of those are true, if any one given one of them is true, if that could have morphed into something like the Moon-eyed people conspiracy in North Carolina, or further west, there's plenty of stories with all the different Indians, like the Nahane and the Navajo and all that stuff, with all these tribes that existed and then supposedly went underground and whatnot. So there's definitely something there.
Yeah, and this goes into another like schizo topic, which is devolution. I don't know why I can't spell that word. So past civilizations, there have been theories that some of these people have reverted so severely, have failed so spectacularly that they've actually like um, gone into like these subhuman forms, which would make sense with what you're describing with these like feral humans or even like certain types of apes, maybe. Especially if they reach the sort of heights where they had the power to influence um, their physical bodies, either through like the same way you would like engineer. I mean, like, why does a pug exist? Like, you don't need super advanced technology for it. That's just breeding something to a wrong end goal, right? So I could see how that's possible to do with a whole civilization if you make the wrong decisions consistently enough.
It's definitely possible. I mean, that's like you can see examples of that, maybe not to the same like extreme, but if you look at cultures, for instance, right after the Bronze Age collapse, where you have cultures that go from a level of sophistication to essentially returning to maybe not necessarily a Stone Age state, but a very, very primitive state, forgetting the written language, the societal organization degenerating. So it's definitely possible, and it's happened, um, the world over. So there's no reason as to why it couldn't happen over here, and that be an explanation for some of these things.
And then there's also the spiritual aspect of it. When you have feral people that are cut off from society, especially Christian society, they have no protection from Christ of whatever's out there in the wilderness.
Yeah, they would become the dominion of whatever's out there.
Can you kind of go more into that, Porter?
Like, I mean, this goes back to medieval tales where it was always known that the woods, the wilderness, was a place of demons. That because Christian society hadn't conquered that area, even in medieval Europe, it was regarded as a place where demons would dwell and not to go out there. And I think the same is true anywhere when you're cut off from society and have no contact with Christian society. You're just inviting yourself open to demonic forces that are out there.
So yeah, yeah. I mean, that would go a ways too. Without branding myself as some sort of like heterodox, heretic, getting too far into, whatever theory we want to take this down. That would explain sort of the gap in like active folklore between, for instance, Europe and the Americas. And kind of going in line with that makes sense for other regions as well. You still have a lot of like what do they call, like jinn stories, in the Middle East, and then God knows whatever voodoo beasts out in Africa. But I guess the lack of saturation in the Christian culture for however long, sufficient period of time. Certainly in the United States, in North America in general, it's been no more than 400 years at best, and even then, for broad swaths of the country, it's been more so like 150 to 200 years.
Yeah, people have commented on this in other areas, how European forests feel like quaint and safe, and American forest, like especially ask anyone who's moved here from Europe, like Britain included, they will say this, like you can just feel the difference. We haven't conquered the woods here for thousands of years. It's still like whatever was there before we got here is still there out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I think, between all that, like we've kind of hit on the Moon Eye people and some of the different legends, and I'm pretty sure we'll kind of touch on some of the feral people. But I guess to kind of segue, still being in the woods, Melon, I know that you had some stories from your time in Western North Carolina during the floods. Is there anything you'd like to talk about with that?
Yeah, man. And this gets into, I'm sure some people in your audience have listened to like Stormy Waters, and I'm not here to like litigate everything that guy's ever said, but I've come to believe that demons operate like sort of non-locally, and I feel like I encountered one. Long story short, and okay, to understand this, there are 4 primal fears in people. There's the fear of darkness, there's the fear of abandonment, and the other 2 slip my mind, but they're not relevant. Fear of abandonment is abandonment by the elder male. You will see this all over the place, like that, including in political life, although we've got a lot of women in it now. But people feel safe when the figurehead is the elder male, because in the past, that would have been the chief. That would have been the rallying standard for defense. And I think this gets used by bad guys to our detriment, because they understand how to manipulate people excellently. So there were 3 people who I think, in my experience, were like possessed that I encountered. The first was an old man. He came to our camp offering some resources and leadership. Despite being a suspicious character for a number of reasons, he was let in without a thought. He was given a leadership position just on his word. People trusted him because he was an old man. He had a glazed over look in his eyes, like he wasn't fully present. But I didn't think more of it at the time. Soon packages started getting intercepted. People would send us things and they would disappear. The drop-off point for our camp was just outside the perimeter, just outside the edge of the light. There were people waiting beyond the perimeter, beyond the light, to grab our stuff and cut us off at night. Soon generators started disappearing, along with other things. This was an organized group, and it was slick. We never caught them on the trail cams we set up. And as soon as we left that camp, because we made the decision to do that, we heard from a friend that even the security cameras were stolen. The second man who offered us help was younger. He was not the elder male, but someone who offered to get us out of the darkness and away from these predators. That is another primal fear the humans have, the fear of predators. He had a glazed over look in his eyes, like he wasn't fully present. In that way, he reminded me of the old man, as if the same spirit or mindset was in him. We trusted him because we were tired. We had brave... Say what? We trusted him because we were tired. Tired of being watchful for predators lurking in the darkness. This guy had some resources from a company in the capital, but he turned out to have bad intentions. He had that same glazed over look in his eyes, and in that way, he reminded me of the old man. The third and final person who was sent to us and offered us help was a middle-aged woman. She had a glazed over look in her eyes, like she wasn't fully present. She brought us to a large house, an Airbnb owned by a group of people. It was never elaborated who actually owned this place, but the woman promised us the place to stay to continue our work. She offered to do this without charging us. She was warm, but not fully present. Something wasn't right. She made a lot of promises. Promises with that glazed over look in her eyes. Some of our group had a strong intuition and recognized that there was a strange locked room in this place. A room slanted on an angle with no doorknob and a lock with no key. The first night I slept in a room next to that room, and just in that transition phase between waking and sleep, I saw a symbol, which I provided to you, if you can bring that up.
Yep, I'll get that up here in a moment.
And whether this was my mind playing tricks on me or not, I don't know, but it was something like this. It was actually the centermost of this image with like the outer octagon, but I didn't see any letters. And I've lost my place here. Whoops. Oh, yes. Again, some of our members of our group had a strong intuition and made a connection between the strange room and an unfinished basement. They go into the angle room, and then they go into the dirt room, the basement. This was a way of downplaying the situation we were in, making light of it. It was just a joke. Even I took part in this. I made fun of this. The demons aren't real. I laugh now because I can't even take it seriously now, because there's fear with these things, and you try to downplay it. Your mind downplays it. The only guy who took this deadly seriously was Jay Ford, and it's because Jay Ford was regularly attending a nearby church. As soon as we started making fun of and downplaying this thing that everybody just intuitively knew was there, things started unraveling. Our host, that woman, the one with the glazed look in her eyes, started viewing us as a threat and making demands of us with that same look in her eye. Our group started to distrust and turn on each other. I started to see that same look in them. And the last night I stayed in that place, I had a dream, and a dream about the basement. I saw a figure with the body of a man, the head of a goat, with a beard and horns like a bull. And I've lost my place again. The next day, everything unraveled, including me. Everyone had this look in their eye, almost the same expression as I previously explained. Everyone except the one guy going to church, which was Ford. Our host told us that we had to get lost, made demands of us that we could not meet, and our team turned on each other. In retrospect, this was out of fear. Fear from the place we were staying in. Everyone had that same look in their eye. We tried to salvage this, but the only one who remained his sanity was Ford. Our group got scattered and disbanded in a panic. The lady who offered to help us, we later learned, had a house that burnt down, and one of her several husbands had turned up dead. I don't know what to make of this, but this is how I think demons work. They don't have a form. They search for a form, and they can be in multiple people at once. You have to trust your intuition. It's that uncanny valley. You can see that look in their eyes. You can see almost the same expression as if they're not really there. Yeah, that's...
To add a bit of context to that, up in the mountains in North Carolina, throughout the mountains, but particularly in the areas surrounding Boone and Asheville and kind of their outcroppings, over the last 20-ish years, there's been a huge uptick in Wicca groups. To the point where there's Wicca farms outside of little towns like Jefferson, North Carolina, which is insane to me. But there's the Wicca groups, and then there's these weird satanic networks that are all connected to every single leftist group out there, like the Palestine group, whatever. They're all interconnected, and they don't really hide themselves. I mean, sure, at a deeper level they do, but at least on face value, you can find them online on social media platforms. So these groups are there, and they make themselves known. They go to these Wicca New Age cult rituals, outside of Asheville or outside of Boone, and they just sort of do this stuff openly. So you can look up certain groups on Instagram, for instance, on X. I'm not going to plug any of them in particular because they don't deserve any publicity. But there's this one group that's the acronym is literally spelled out as Satan. Now that it stands for different things, but you can do with that what you will. And this is all the stuff that they do publicly, so it makes you think what kind of possessions and occult stuff are these freaks doing in private?
Yeah, is it even them? Are they just the vessel for something?
Yeah, so I saw that Not Me, Not You mentioned that he didn't know what that image was. I did an image search on it, and some of the stuff that came back, it's a mystical or occult diagram. It's often referred to as a magic circle or an esoteric sigil. The rings with the symbols and the letters, possibly names or incantations. You've got pentagrams and hexagrams. And we all pretty much know what most of that means, but some of these could be protection, invocation, or spiritual balance. It does have some ties with some kind of like alchemy. Now, a lot of times, kind of going to what Mr. Rhodes was saying, like ritual magic or ceremonial practices. It could also serve as a protective seal, a summoning circle, or a spiritual map of spiritual forces. The complexity suggests that it could be linked to traditions like Thelma, Kabbalah, and my kids are screaming, or heretic, like a heretic type symbol.
Yeah, and also I'm not an expert on this, right? But the octagon, I mean, that's a stop sign. That's the same shape as like a police officer's helmet. Like, what if they put the octagon? If the pentagram is a Christian symbol, then is putting the octagon around it like imprisoning it? Or am I reaching here?
Yeah, I'm not an expert. Like, I listen to like a lot of metal and stuff, so I see a lot of these symbols, and they're usually more of it's a shock value, a lot more like dealing with occult. There are some bands that do talk about like magic and stuff like that, but yeah, I couldn't tell you, but yeah, you could, I guess like that's one way of looking at it. And if you go with some of that description, some could say it's like a protective seal as well. So I guess it just depends, right? On the view that you're coming from.
Yeah, I can't make a whole lot of sense of it. There was also this incident where I went to a chapel or a Catholic church it wasn't in Nashville. It was one of the outlying towns, and they said they habitually have people go in there and try and steal the Eucharist. And I know this because I made an error with it, and they thought I was a Satanist, and it wasn't just like they immediately figured out I had just made a mistake, but there was real fear in their eyes. Like this had happened before to them.
That practice goes back a long time. It's part of witchcraft. It's been around for, well, as long as there's been a Eucharist, pretty much.
Yeah. I think it is important when we're talking about these groups, kind of like the caveat I gave earlier. When you're talking about like satanic groups, I think you can broadly split them into two categories. Number one being like the real, like, oh wow, this is scary, like the story that you described to me. And then number two is like sort of like an overgrown LARP. And unfortunately, this is the two nerve centers of this type are, as always, Boone and Asheville. And they sort of grow out of like these weird, somewhat culty, like leftist groups that they sort of combine all, check all the boxes, like the Palestine stuff, the trans stuff, the Wicca stuff, and the satanic stuff, all sort of into one package and tie a little bow around it. So I wonder, sort of like what's the dividing line in like those incidents as to like, which group is like the like committed out there Satanists, and which ones are like the LARPers, or maybe the LARPers are trying to become the committed group. I don't know, but it's a concern up here. It really is, especially as Boone and Asheville expand. There's a lot of like hick libs up here. The whole like redneck revolt thing is actually like a tangible concern up in these areas, like these weird militant satanic groups that you're never going to hear anything about them or read an article about them, because no leftist media source is going to expose their own, but they're definitely up here, and only growing, especially with the like all the new age stuff, which Asheville is absolutely the center of in the United States.
It's interesting because like a lot of the Wiccan stuff, there is some of, I'm not by any stretch of the means like an expert in it, but I know about it just from listening to some people that I knew at one point in time that had some family members that was into it. Like there's a lot of like self power and a lot of connecting with nature as well. And it would make sense in the way of those particular groups. One, like you were saying, like the one that's not like very serious about it. They do it just because it's the new cool, cute thing to do. It makes them quote unquote unique. It makes sense because there's a lot of earthly elements like involved with some of the practice. Yeah.
But it's dangerous, man. It really is. It's dangerous stuff because
Well,
all it takes is some idiot fooling around, and that's all it takes. That's all it takes to turn some fool into one of the three people Melon just described.
Yeah,
it's
but
really dangerous stuff.
I mean, it's a gateway drug essentially to darker witchcraft.
Yeah, and they don't understand. That's the thing, is like our society or our particular culture delegitimizes mysticism and the supernatural, while at the same time boosting it up, like but it's kind of like religion. Like religion has to a lot of these people like no real power, if that makes sense. They don't take it seriously. So I think that's the reason why they do that. They don't understand like what they're playing with.
I see a guy in chat. We should expose these satanic networks. I don't think that would do anything, because the people who would be receptive to that already know. Like okay, so this is a side thing. A lot of people with secular priors need to experience this in real life, or they won't. They can, like, you can intellectualize this and be like, oh, I know there's demons. You have to encounter it in real life. It's basically the same thing as like sex or violence. You can read about it as much as you want, but you won't know. It's not. It won't change your priors until you actually experience it. And a lot of people are that way with spiritual things. So I don't think that would do anything. Unfortunately, they have to act. It has to hit them in the face.
Yeah,
basically.
And then on the more, like, if you're talking on like a more strategic angle, tactical angle, whatever you want to call it, aside from the very obvious spiritual nature behind it, there's the way that these groups organize is they're very good at using layers and layers of cover groups. So any sort of like leftist group, which I'm just going to call them Antifa for the purposes of this discussion, because that's sort of what they all boil down to. Satanist or just whatever, communist. It's like a shell within a shell within a shell, and unfortunately, the only way to, like, Mike Shelby style, break them down would be to have someone do like a James O'Keefe undercover, like getting in deep with them. And number one, that's dangerous because the militant lefty groups are, they've proven time and time again that they will murder you. And then number two, like, it's just like that sort of stuff is just something that I don't think is worth messing with or trying to cozy up to in the sense of trying to infiltrate. I think
you can't do it ironically. Like, if you start being an ironic Satanist to like infiltrate them, that's not how it works. Like, that won't go well.
Yeah, bullets and crosses. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, I'll be honest too. Some of those people might actually get a kick out of it, and it might just kind of bolster what they're into.
Yeah, they'll find you. Like the way to fight them is to you won't have to go find them. You just have to just be like a gardener, grow your thing, and it's going to get messed with at some point by them, and we just have to deal with it.
Yeah, they absolutely will seek you out. I mean, they're, without getting into any particulars, they've targeted churches in the area in various manners, as Melon described, and then there's plenty of other examples of all sorts of shenanigans. But yeah, it's very dangerous stuff.
All right. Yeah, Melon, thanks for telling us that story. Obviously, I know that we were talking a little bit before the stream, and there's obviously a lot of schizo routes that we can go down. And I think we should totally do that at some point in time, because we're gonna have more of these, obviously. But yeah, any thoughts on that before we move on to another story?
Oh, and I will say, if anyone has anything to add on or whatever, just throw that in the chat. We'll definitely respond to that, like Mr. Pine did. But yeah, guess we can go ahead and move on to Mr. Porter's story.
Yeah. We'll kind of segue into that because Porter had an experience, and I guess like it's a pretty good gateway into what very similar to in some regards. I know that Porter talked about this in our group chat, and as soon as he said that, Mr. Rhodes and I knew that we had to bring him on to one of these streams to discuss. So yeah, Porter, the floor is yours. Have at it, man.
Yeah, this was a trip that I took last year at the end of May and beginning of July, with 3 friends of mine. We had in Uwharrie National Forest. We had started out at the Northern Trailhead. I can't remember the name of it. I think it's like Tot Hill Farm Trailhead or something like that. We started late, so it was about 6 o'clock when we went out, and our plan was to do a 2-day hike, about a 14-mile round trip. And we didn't go far, obviously, because we started at 6 in the evening. So we made it about a mile in, maybe 2 miles in, at one of the first couple campsites, set up there. And about 12:30 at night, I get woken up to a sound like somebody just sprinting right through the campsite. And this campsite's up on a hill, so there's a little bit of a slope, and there's a lot of leaves still left, I guess, from the previous winter. And I get up trying to figure out what's going on. Of course, I got my flashlight and gun out by this point, and everyone's up because everyone heard it. And we all kind of just fan out trying to see if what was ran through our campsite, because it sounded bipedal. But at first we were like, well, maybe we just misheard it and it was a bear or something. No sign of anything. I even went out to where we set up our food bag, and nothing had bothered it. So we just kind of settled down, restart the campfire to kind of calm our nerves. And then my friend Alistair, who was with me, he had said that right before he had heard the noise, he had a dream where it looked like a man with white face paint on and black markings was staring at him in his hammock. And then he got kind of woke him up, and that's when he had heard the noise. But after, I guess, maybe 30 minutes to an hour, we finally settled back into our tents and hammocks. And then we get woken up again by something rustling through the leaves about 50 yards away to the south of our campsite. And so we all get up. It's loud enough to wake up everyone. And I got a nice little flashlight. It's got about 2,600 lumens. So it was like a little spotlight out there. And where we heard the noise from, I could see eye shine. It was blue-colored eye shine. Whatever it was big. I didn't really get a silhouette or anything. It was just the eye shine, and it kept peeking behind a tree and then hiding. And that went on for a few minutes, but we weren't really wanting to get near it, whatever it was. But it didn't make any sounds at that point. And eventually we just stopped seeing the eye shine. So it wasn't just me that saw the eye shine. Everyone that was able to look in that direction saw the eye shine. But so we restarted the campfire, and pretty much just, I really didn't get any sleep the rest of that night. It was pretty much just me in my tent and just listening for anything, just being on edge the rest of the night until morning came. And then we packed up, had our breakfast, and went on down the trail thinking that, maybe it was just a one-night thing. And then we got to our next campsite, which is about another 5 or 6 miles down the trail. We found a little place next to a creek in a valley, which looked like a really nice camp spot in the daytime. It was a different story at night because you got the hills all around you, and then you kind of feel, closed in and surrounded. But so, we settled down there, and I think it was at 12:30 again. I get waken up to the sound of screaming that was like off in the distance, but kind of close, like it was up on the hill. And it wasn't just like screaming of an animal. It was clear words, somebody screaming for help, like somebody help me. And like somebody was getting murdered out there. It was terrifying. And I'm just laying there kind of wondering if I'm the only one hearing this. And here my friend Justin, who had his tent next to me, he called out my name, and I was like, yeah, let's figure out what's going on. So we get up. I got my gun and flashlight. We go over to Alistair's hammock and wake him up because he was dead asleep. And of course, since he's just hearing, all he sees is somebody yelling his name and flashlights in his face, he jumps up and tears through his mosquito net out of his hammock. And Matt's already getting out of his hammock. By that time, when we're already out, we don't really hear anything, any of the screaming. But it was like unnaturally cold that night, where at first we just thought it was the adrenaline and just kind of the chills you get from the adrenaline, but we could see our own breath. It was unnaturally cold for that time of year. And we're all on edge. Justin wants to go out and see if anybody actually needs help, but we're in the middle of nowhere. We hadn't really seen anybody on the trail that was going to be overnight stay. So we're out there in the middle of nowhere, pretty much alone. There's no signal, and it's no moon out that night at all. So it's just pitch black. And we all have this sense of dread that even Justin, though he wants to go and check and see if somebody is hurt or something and needs help, he just has this feeling in the pit of his stomach that we just need to stay at the campsite. So we start up the campfire again, and at this point we're all exhausted, but we decide to take shifts where 2 of us stay up and watch while the other 2 try to get some sleep, and then switch off about midway through the night. I still, even though when it was my turn, I didn't really get any sleep at all. And so I ended up just staying up until light came. And at that point, we're all too exhausted to complete the whole loop. So we went to the nearest trailhead and hitched a ride to. Well, one of us hitched a ride to get a car and or with somebody to get one of the cars and ferry us back to the rest of our vehicles. And it was just a really intense sense of dread. I was like, I'm not going back into those woods again. And that's kind of what I can remember of that story.
And one more time, the location. You said the God, I can't pronounce that forest name. Urahi?
Uwari.
Uwari. Okay.
At least
That's
I think
interesting.
that's how
I
it's
was thinking
pronounced.
about planning an NGS hike out there, but maybe we don't do that now.
It's a big forest, and there's a lot of different a lot of different trails to go through. But on that one in particular, that I think was Tots Hill, was one I don't recommend going.
Yeah, that it's very interesting. That what you described has been in various forms probably the most common phenomenon that people describe whenever they have any sort of encounters, in the woods in general, particularly in the Appalachians. It's always some sort of creature or thing, whatever the case may be, stalking and observing and then causing, nightmares. Sometimes rummaging through stuff, but that's the trend line, There's dozens and dozens of encounters. You can look up online or throw it in a grok or something, like give me a list of all these encounters and you'll see like something 1970, a group describes being watched and stalked in their campsite in Burt County, blah blah blah. 1990, a similar incident in the Pisgah Forest. Um, it seems to be like whatever the the threat actor is, pretty consistently is causing like a sense of dread. It's stalking, campers, and it's causing these like these nightmares and whatever. There's a really interesting tale that Theodore Roosevelt of all people wrote about this guy named Bauman. And there's a few good YouTubers that have made videos about it. One of them is from this guy named the Lore Lodge. But it's a really interesting tale of this guy named Bauman, who is the speculation goes that Teddy Roosevelt is actually writing an like he's writing about himself in this instance, and it's a very similar situation to what you described of this thing like stalking his campsite. These two guys were trappers, stalking their stuff, messing with their traps, and according to the story, eventually his partner dies, which is kind of wild, and then Bowman just sort of books it out of the forest. But all that to say, like that type of incident is very well attested to, going back well over 100 years, even beyond that, pretty much as long as the white man's been able to write it down. It's interesting,
Yeah, and that's not the only thing, because like I didn't go back, but my friend Justin, his brother Alistair, and one other guy went there 2 weeks later to go on the same trail, and they had more experiences. Like his brother had a picture of a rope that was in a tree that wasn't there when they set up camp, but it was there in the night, and they had something up in the trees throwing branches in their area, like breaking a branch and the falling next to their tent, but not actually hitting anybody, but coming close to it.
Yeah, I've doing some research 3 weeks ago about for this episode. I was coming across all sorts of videos of creepiest videos from the Appalachians and stuff, and there were several that I came across. This one in particular stuck with me still, where this woman caught voices on her camera and it reminded me of Porter's story.
Oh my Lord, man.
It was just.
Sorry.
Oh,
Finish your thread. Sorry.
Oh no, but it was like this creepy, like kind of woman just saying like "let me in" and stuff like that, and it just stuff like that stuck with me. And I've seen other stuff like where these people will go on the Appalachian Trail or just go camping in the Appalachians, and they're just like looking for stuff, and they would just randomly come across these like abandoned buildings or whatever. But they always talk about the sense of dread, and they would just start hearing random noises, and again, then that kind of goes into this person went missing, and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. There's always been like, have you heard of the old like I guess you can call it wise man's tale, or like the just the never go on the staircase in the woods or whatever, or never go near the chimneys in the woods.
Yeah.
That whole thing. It's so all right. So a lot of those are decently inconspicuous. So a lot of the time it's like, okay, there was a homestead here, and when you build a log cabin with a brick chimney, the only thing that's going to be still standing 200 years later is the chimney, right? So it kind of makes sense. But at the same time, there's like all this folklore surrounding, those particular structures or whatever, and there's, stories abounding of like stairways in the woods being like some sort of gateway to whatever. I don't really want to go down that route, but
yeah,
all those sorts of stories are out there. What I was kind of like getting a little like giddy about was when you were mentioning videos and whatnot of people like capturing some of these incidents. There's a famous, probably the most famous, like quote unquote Bigfoot or Dogman or whatever you want to call it encounter. This isn't in the Appalachians. This is actually on the other side of the country, up in the Cascades. Um, I don't know the name of the video offhand, but essentially this group of guys managed to capture these like chattering noises that they're like almost speech. Um, it honestly sounds like not like Charlie Brown speech, but like Uncanny Valley, like almost talking. And it's gonna bug me now because I can't find the name of the video, but there's a famous recording of it. If any of you are able to find it, you put it in the chat so I don't lose my mind over this. But I wonder, if there's any connection there, or at the very least, it's establishing some sort of precedent for that.
What's interesting is there was a old stone chimney next to the second campsite that we were staying at. I don't know if that has anything to do with it because it was still part of the campsite, but it was an old one that had been there from a previous house.
Yeah, not me, not you said, was this the Max Shearwood or Shearwater recording?
No. This is no, it wasn't that. It's some sort of like hunt camp. I don't know. When I was going down my Dogman rabbit hole years ago, I have a friend who's like a older Gen X, like very late boomer, who's kind of like drank the whole Dogman Kool-Aid, and he's obsessed with Dogman and Bigfoot, and he's like, oh,
Yeah,
you got to hear this. You got to hear this. And that's where I heard it.
Yeah, because I really got into Sasquatch years and years ago, and I know that the chatter stuff is something. There's the wood knocking, breaking of branches, getting branches thrown at you, just different stuff like that is some of the descriptors that come along with maybe indirect or direct Bigfoot encounters.
Yeah, Now that I'm thinking about it, um, so we're talking about all this Appalachian folklore, and all the ideas of like things living underground, for instance. What level of disturbance do you think the hurricane might have had on habitats or whatever or hunting grounds or nests or whatever of feral people or moon-eyed people or
Well,
Bigfoot or whatever,
we know, like for a fact, that there were a bunch of homeless camps along the rivers, weren't there? That got wiped out.
Yeah, yeah, and those death statistics will never be recorded, but that's an aside.
Well, yeah. So one of the kind of schizo things that Melon and I were chatting about before, before the stream, water is usually associated with energy and different types of paranormal activity. And definitely around floods and stuff like that. Obviously you have these disturbances physically, but there's also that supernatural element. If you really get schizo in it, water is, we were talking about magic earlier, and water is a force used like within magic, but when people talk about, and this is something that we can probably go into at another time, but anytime you have ghosts, demons, other type of supernatural elements, that's a big tent there. There's usually like a lot of minerals around, water, different type of natural elements around, and a lot of people think that energy that's stored up in those things tend to, I guess, motivate those particular forces.
Well, you've also got the thing where Team Evil essentially views like these. Maybe I shouldn't use the term biblical floods, but they view these natural disasters as like a rite of passage. So, like, there was a percentage of people that were probably not supposed to have survived the past really big floods. And I don't know this, but it seemed like there was some sort of foreknowledge of this one by some people, but it was all just rumors of like people preparing to settle scores and like throwing people into the floodwater and stuff like this. I can't prove anything, but it does make you think.
Yeah, I mean, natural disasters are just natural. I mean, you think back, I mean, you can go all the way. There's other examples, right? But one of the main ones that you could even talk about is when Hellbot came through and all the different cults that came about to that. But even before then, people started sensing something was happening. And you have these different times throughout history where there's odder or more peculiar things happening. People, like crime goes up or different things. So, definitely, natural forces can make people, even though we don't know that they're about to happen, they can cause people to, and I'm not an expert in this. I'm just like going off of all my years of being, kind of a tinfoil hat fan. But there's different times throughout history around like different natural disasters or natural events where people do tend to act odd or peculiar.
Yeah, and then you have this thing where there was this theory that water has a memory. I know there was some Japanese scientist guy who did a bunch of experiments on this about like people praying over water or trying to store things in water. And if you Google this now, Wikipedia will say, no, that's not true, which makes me think it's true. So what happens when an entire area gets flooded and like all this suffering like, does that stay in the water that then goes into the land? Like, could you set this
Well,
up as? Go ahead.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, that even goes to like, you know, if you even want to like even not even touch on water, just events themselves, right? So a lot of people, like when they talk about hauntings or what have you, like there's usually a lot of activity near battlefields, houses that have suicides in them, different stuff like that. So you got to think like a flood or anywhere that a natural disaster happens, where a very tragedy strikes at a mass event. You would have to kind of, if you believe in all this, that it would have some kind of impact. Maybe through the water, maybe like on the land itself. So yeah, I don't think that's too far of a stretch. And Joseph's having some problems here.
Yeah, there were other weird things, man. So I know there was the Wicca guys that Horatius was talking about. There were actually a bunch of like Amish. There were a bunch of alternative medicine people who worked on the Amish that moved down to that area of West North Carolina before this happened, which was weird. And I don't think those guys were Satanists. So there was like these pre-positioning, and they didn't know why they were doing it. They just suddenly decided like Pennsylvania wasn't for them and moved down there. Like I know several people who did this. And there were a ton of people who went down there who said God told them to. There's something weird going on in those mountains out there, man.
Yeah, we always we focus on the mountains because that's where the majority of these phenomenons and stories and so on and so forth are. But kind of along those same lines, the eastern part of North Carolina, out in the swamp, it's not as uncharted necessarily, or not uncharted is not the best word, but as young per se as the mountains are. But there are a decent amount of stories out there as well. You have a similar sort of situation where a lot of the swampland or just low-lying flat coastal plain land is kind of unused, or if it's used, it's just it's farmland, whatever. Um, so there's a lot of stories out in like the Inner Banks region of all sorts of like dogmen or whatever. I'm not going to get into that as much as there's a particular legend. If you go up into the very far northeast part of the state, bordering with Virginia, up in the Dismal Swamp. Now this is of North Carolina legend as much as this is of Virginia, but perhaps a little bit more Virginia. Um, there's some native legends up in the area of a like a white light phenomenon that's relatively similar to the Brown Mountain lights. I don't necessarily think I would hedge any bets on like making a direct connection, but there are some interesting similarities. But there's a legend up in that swamp of folks seeing a light out in Drummond Lake and some of the creeks and whatnot that are around. And that legend being anything from a wholesome but tragic native story to a darker influence to whatever. So those stories abound kind of like all over the state. It's really interesting.
I mean, lights
Yeah,
in
I
the
definitely.
swamps is lights in the swamps have been a tale that's been very old. It goes back to the will-o-wisps, which the warning is always don't follow the lights.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I definitely want to maybe have another episode on that. Because I've heard some different tales. I had one of my best friends in high school. His family was kind of around that from that area originally, and they had some different tales, especially a lot about the lights. And there was just a lot of different stories that they had to tell us. That place, yeah.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, I wonder. Go
ahead, Melon. Go ahead.
I do wonder. So there that whole devolution thing and like chimeric humans. I wonder how many of these things are like degenerated, like fallen humans from an earlier time. But then the time gets weird, and then you get into arguments over how old the actual Earth is, but we already see people trying to augment themselves or doing things that shouldn't happen, like breeding pugs. I mean, I could see that happening where, like, why don't I just give myself muscles from some other species or something, and then like that gets out of control really quick. I could see that happening. Like we're seeing it in our own time. Like people are like, why don't I augment what God has given me? What's the worst that can happen? These people don't know what they're messing with.
Yeah. Yeah, you see it a lot with the modern day body modification, but you got to wonder what people were really doing before before the modern day.
I mean, you got the demoniac in Scripture that had supernatural strength that was breaking chains and living in a graveyard. I mean, what's to say that these feral people are not possessed in the same way, where they're demoniacs that have supernatural strength, not from their own physical body, but supernatural strength that's given to them because of the demons that are dwelling in them.
Yeah, I could see that.
I mean, a lot of the tales that are given by these encounters with feral people, usually they're in some kind of occultic-like robe, even if it's old and tattered. And there's speculation that there could be cannibalism or other kind of dark stuff going on with people that they disappear in areas that they've been seen.
Yeah. Yeah, speaking of cannibalism, we'll move into our last story here, because there are some there is some it does touch a little bit on who are the suspects, but there was a child that went missing in the late 60s that went by the name of Dennis Martin. Now, Dennis Martin went on a camping trip with his parents. Actually, it was on Father's Day of 1969 in the Great Smoky Mountains, right there on the NC Tennessee border. They had gone on a camping trip, and they went on a hike. And as the time went along, the kids got ahead of the adults. And basically what happened was, I think it was 3 kids, 3 boys maybe, but I know it was 3 kids. They all got ahead of the adults, and they decided that they wanted to play a trick on the parents. So they decided to hide in a bush. They all separated, hide in the bushes, and then jump out and scare the adults. So when the adults came up, two of the kids jumped out and scared the parents, but Dennis never appeared. Now, what ends up happening from here is obviously they start searching for Dennis, and they're just not able to find him. Now his dad starts to look for him, starts running around. He runs down basically about 2 miles down the Appalachian Trail, and they don't find him. So he's able to get some park rangers, and they have the park rangers and a bunch of volunteers, and they start doing a search. Basically, over a course of weeks, there was around 1,400 people involved in the search, and this even included a group of Green Berets that happened to be in the area. They searched the entire area, and they were never able to find a body, no clothing, nothing that ever belonged to Dennis. Now, there's obviously a couple of things, and I'm just kind of giving a high level of the story, but that night that he went missing, there was a heavy downpour. About 2.5 inches of rain fell that night. So obviously it threw some of the trail off. Now there are a lot of conspiracies around the story, and I've done some deep dives into that, especially over the last couple of days. There are some people that believe that the feral people got him. There was even a story about a wild man that may have gotten him. That he fell into a portal, which is another schizo rabbit hole. There are tons of stories around, Dennis, and it's still considered to be one of the bigger unsolved mysteries. That what is his name? Pilatus. He mentioned this in his Missing 411 book. Doing my dive and stuff, I find this story to be really interesting, and you could even almost move it into part of the whole quote unquote true crime area. If you even take away the supernatural element, there have been some interviews, like one of the key witnesses was this gentleman named Harold Keyes. Mr. Keyes and his family were out hiking, and I believe they were camping, but they were also hiking around the same area. And they reported of hearing some screams. And his story gets a little convoluted because some people say that he saw a man carrying a child. Other people say that he saw a wild man. He does go on to discuss in a book later on. He gives an interview in 2016 when he was in his 90s. And we could talk about that here a little bit, but I was just curious if y'all have heard about that story or not.
The bit that actually caught my attention was the portals thing. Is this the same thing as the Wild Ways that famously 4chan made a post about? Like these portals under trees that people get lost in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that one I didn't dive too much into because that one is like the least talked about out of all these. Like this, his story tends to get thrown around a lot with the wild man, the feral people, or on the supernatural side. Portals is the one that usually kind of gets least talked about, but there are some people that think that when he went to hide, he stumbled across a portal and he fell into it. Because there was just no trace of him.
Didn't they find some of like his shoes or something like that?
So what's interesting about his story is this is everything that I've watched or read about this. There have been some reports that never got put into the official report. And supposedly a lot of people talk about how inept this search was, because when they did their search, they mostly contained it down to like a 2-mile radius, and they didn't really go outside of this radius. But there was reports of there was a set of kid footprints, and one had a shoe and one didn't have a shoe. I don't know if they ever found the shoe or saw the shoe, but I do know that there was reports of those footprints, one with and one without.
That's interesting. The thing that really catches my attention about this particular story were the dozens of Green Berets that showed up to help. Now,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it's not uncommon. Well, it's uncommon, but it's not unheard of for like National Guard search and rescue personnel to assist out, like CSAR, especially like helicopter crews, with different like searches that go on, and that's actually a fairly regular thing. But like for however many Green Berets, I think it was like 50 or so, according to the
I
like
think
sources.
53. I think
Yeah, for
53.
53 special forces operators to show up to assist in a search, it's weird. Um, from what I've read about the case, they didn't really operate under the same like incident command structure as the actual search effort. They sort of did their own thing. Not like entirely their own like search and stuff, but they were in their own area running their own communications with their own helicopters kind of deal. And so there's been plenty of conspiracies that have spawned off of that. I don't know how much ground they have, but some of those, state, like, okay, well, the government sent the Green Berets into, the Pisgah to sort of cull off a population of something. Maybe that makes sense. I don't know. This is also the late 60s when they were, it was the 60s. You could kind of just do things back then. So, I mean, that maybe that's an explanation, but it's just really weird. This incident in particular had a special, like a substantial special forces element show up to aid in the search, whereas like, incidents around that time or after that time didn't really ever get that same kind of response to them.
Yeah, the stuff I've mostly watched a lot of videos over the last couple of days about this story, and there were some just differences in like how they operated versus the park rangers and maybe the local law enforcement. But a lot of their search, there was belief that they came across because of how they were searching about the area, that they actually came across some leads. And they were obviously on different comms because of military and stuff like that, and what's interesting was they were doing some training in the area, and I can't recall how they got engaged to participate in it, but yeah, that is it kind of caused even more confusion, or that's part of the conspiracy, right? Is that there really weren't a lot of answers around them. But like what I find interesting is like even getting away from the quote unquote supernatural for a moment. Mr. Key gave an interview later to this gentleman named I lost his first name, but his last name was Brochet, and he's got this book called Forever Searching. And Mr. Key gave his final interview about it. He had only given a couple of interviews about it, and he goes into some detail about how he was actually contacted by the FBI. And the FBI, essentially, he goes into this in the book, and I haven't read the book, but I've watched a couple of videos on just kind of like an overview about the book and his particular interview. So he, in the book, talks about the experience, and he saw he and his family saw a man and he was kind of like a very rough looking man. And he was trying to kind of hide in the bush line and in the tree line a little bit. And he saw this man shortly after the scream that he and his family heard. From there, he knew that the only way back for this guy to make it back to the particular area, like the only trail was like basically towards his wife and his kids. So he went back to make sure that they were going to be okay. The reports are that man went to a white car and then drove off, and they said that he was acting really weird. Now he kind of just wanted to get out of the area, so they left. He didn't tell anybody about the seeing this guy for at least, I think it was about a week or so. And then that's when he started hearing about the Dennis's story. From there, I think he gave one interview or something like that. And the FBI, that was quote unquote not officially involved quite yet, did get involved and just basically told him and would contact him, don't talk about this story. And he kept quiet until basically 2016 when he gave this interview. And when he gave this interview, he just kind of told this story. And he thinks that, excuse me. He thinks basically what happened was that he saw the guy that may have kidnapped Dennis. And he thinks that that guy probably murdered him. Now, he just kind of told everything about the story, and then some years later he passed. I think he was in his 90s when he gave this interview. But one of the things that I did stumble on was years and years ago, I think this was back in the 90s, they did find some remains of a child. The bones of a child. And it was, for whatever reason, they've never identified the child, and they never decided to connect it with Dennis's story. So again, it's one of these things, like, there's so much mystery, even if you take out the supernatural element. There's a lot to that particular story.
Yeah, there's also not so much in the Dennis Martin case, but some other cases. I think it might have been the Trini Gibson case, or maybe one of the others. But there's some speculation. Some of these cases in the mid 20th century, speculation that the individuals might have been murdered and hidden by like moonshiners. I don't know how much I buy that, but that's at least a theory, and it kind of makes sense. If we're talking like the 50s, that's kind of like the heyday, 50s, 60s, whatever. That's like the heyday of that, of like the second wave of moonshining, and I guess you can kind of draw some sort of a at least reasonable conclusion for maybe a couple of those cases, for that being a possibility. Now, I don't even consider that for Dennis's particular case, but nefarious people, be they feral or otherwise, that's definitely a good possibility, and it's the perfect place to do something like that. Like this is like completely out of the realm of anything conspiratorial or esoteric, but it's a proven fact that the Appalachian Trail is extremely dangerous. There's serial killers up and down the trail. There's just I think some of the human trafficker networks, they don't use the trail obviously, but they operate in the same areas. And then I'm sure everyone's seen the the meme image of like the correlation between disappearances in the United States and then like limestone caves, and there's a massive cluster of those in the Appalachian region. So you see cases like these where it's like we don't know what happened. Um, we can speculate, maybe Sasquatch got him, or maybe some crazed lunatic murdered this dude and threw him in a cave, and they'll never find it.
Yeah.
I think recently, I don't know if y'all saw the the mugshot. We got our first. I shouldn't really be laughing about this, but we got our first broccoli-haired Zoomer serial killer, who was his
I haven't
victims were all
seen
on
this.
trails up in like hiking trails.
I haven't seen this one, but yeah, you could get really schizo and talk about Garth Brooks and his murder trial. Yeah, yeah, we've been going for almost 2 hours tonight. Love to do this again, and yeah, I guess before we close out tonight, gentlemen, is there any final thoughts before we close it out tonight? Melon, you want to start off?
I think we're in a very spiritually active time. We're going to see some things that won't make sense to those who still have a secular worldview, and it'll be scary at first for those people. But there's more than an evil side to this.
Indeed. Porter, how about you, sir?
I mean, I concur what Melon said. I mean, the best advice is go to church, trust in Christ to protect you against the very real evil that's out there.
Yes, sir. Mr. Rhodes, how about you? They may have gotten Rhodes.
Sasquatch got him. There
I'm
it is,
back.
boys.
Sorry, Israel got me. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, trust in the Lord. Demons are real. Spiritual warfare is real. And then also on the, more tactical side, if you're gonna go in the woods, bring a buddy, bring multiple buddies. Always go into the woods armed. Never go unarmed ever.
Yeah, actually,
Even if you're not dealing with demons, bullets work really well on deranged psychos.
Yeah, I got a Glock 40 10 millimeter that I carry when I go hiking.
Yeah.
more than just the physical harm, demons attack people who are alone. That's when bad things happen, and it doesn't have to mean like it's a physical thing. Just in general, make some friends and stick with them.
Yeah. Oh, and join the OGC. Join the NGS if you're in North Carolina. You want hiking buddies? We can supply them.
All right, gentlemen. Well, yeah, I think y'all pretty much touched up on any good closing thoughts here. So, yeah, be on the lookout for more of these streams in the future. When we get a free Saturday night, we'll definitely let y'all know. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Y'all have a good week.